What if everything you've been told about happiness is a lie? Not a small lie, a big one. The kind that shaped civilizations, built religions, and sent millions of people on wild goose chases for 2,000 years. Aristotle called it eudaimonia. The Stoics called it ataraxia. Bentham called it the greatest pleasure for the greatest number. And every single one of them, wrong, dead wrong. Here's the kicker. They weren't wrong because they were stupid. These were the smartest people who ever lived. They were wrong because they were asking the wrong question entirely. And if you keep asking the wrong question, it doesn't matter how brilliant your answer is. You're still lost. So stick with me, because in the next few minutes, I'm going to show you why the greatest minds in history completely missed the mark on happiness. And more importantly, what they missed that actually works. Let me take you back to 300 BC. Aristotle is walking through the Lyceum in Athens. Students follow him like he's a rock star. Because he basically is. This guy figured out logic, biology, ethics, politics. He wrote the playbook on how to think. And then he turns to happiness. His answer? Eudaimonia, often translated as flourishing. The idea that happiness isn't a feeling. It's a life well lived. Virtue plus purpose plus reason. Do good, be good, think good, and happiness follows like a shadow. Sounds beautiful, right? Here's the problem. Aristotle never tested it. He never ran an experiment. He never asked 1,000 people, "Hey, are you actually happy?" He just thought really hard in a room and declared victory. And for 2 millennia, everyone nodded along. Yeah, that makes sense. Because it sounds like it makes sense. It's logical, it's elegant, it feels true. But feeling true and being true, not even close. Fast forward to the Stoics, Marcus Aurelius, Seneca, Epictetus. These guys were the original mental toughness coaches. Happiness is tranquility, freedom from disturbance, control what you can, accept what you can't. Again, beautiful on paper, and I'll give them this. Some of their techniques actually work. Cognitive reframing, modern psychology stole that straight from Epictetus. But the underlying theory, still wrong. Because here's what neither Aristotle nor the Stoics understood. Happiness isn't a destination. It's not a state you arrive at. It's not the reward for being virtuous or tranquil or reasonable. Happiness is a byproduct, a side effect, the exhaust fumes of a life lived in a very specific way, and almost no philosopher figured out what that way actually is. Why? Because they were obsessed with the mind, with thinking, with reason, with willpower, and they completely ignored the body, the brain, the actual biological machinery that generates the feeling we call happiness. It's like trying to understand why a car moves by studying the steering wheel and completely ignoring the engine. You can have the most profound insights about steering. You're still not going to understand motion. Now, some of you are thinking, okay, but what about the utilitarians, Bentham and Mill? They were all about pleasure. They paid attention to the feeling. Fair point, but they made the opposite mistake. Bentham thought happiness was just pleasure minus pain. Simple math. More pleasure, less pain, equals happy life. So far so good. But then he said all pleasures are equal. Pushpin is as good as poetry. A simple game is as valuable as great art if it gives the same amount of pleasure. John Stuart Mill tried to fix this by saying there are higher and lower pleasures. Intellectual pleasures are better than physical ones. But now he's back to Aristotle's problem. He's deciding what's good for you based on his own prejudices. Based on what sounds noble. Neither of them had brain scans. Neither of them knew about dopamine, or serotonin, or oxytocin, or the difference between wanting and liking, between pursuit and satisfaction. They were doing philosophy with one hand tied behind their back. And they didn't even know it. Here's where it gets really interesting. In the 1970s, a psychologist named Philip Brickman did a study that should have ended half of philosophical debate forever. He looked at lottery winners and paraplegics. One group just got millions of dollars, the other just lost the use of their legs. You'd think the lottery winners would be ecstatic forever, and the paraplegics would be miserable, right? That's what every philosopher would predict. More pleasure, less pain, virtue, circumstance, all of it. Nope. Within months, both groups returned to basically their baseline happiness levels. The millionaires weren't happier. The paraplegics weren't as unhappy as you'd think. This is called hedonic adaptation, and it destroys almost every philosophical theory of happiness ever written. Because if your circumstances don't determine your happiness long term, then what does? Aristotle said it was virtue. The Stoics said it was tranquility. The utilitarians said it was pleasure. But if a guy with no legs and a guy with a private jet end up equally happy, none of those theories explain what's actually going on. The philosophers were playing checkers while the brain was playing chess. Now let me be clear. I'm not saying philosophy is useless. Marcus Aurelius still helps people. Stoic techniques still work for anxiety. Aristotle's idea of purpose still resonates. But as theories of happiness, they failed. They failed because they didn't have the tools. They didn't have neuroscience. They didn't have psychology labs. They didn't have data from thousands of people. If you follow Aristotle's playbook perfectly, if you live the most virtuous, purposeful, reasonable life possible, you might still be miserable. Because virtue doesn't automatically produce the neurochemistry of happiness. If you follow the Stoics perfectly, if you achieve perfect tranquility and acceptance, you might still feel empty. Because tranquility isn't the same as joy. If you maximize pleasure and minimize pain like Bentham said, you might end up addicted, burned out, and spiritually bankrupt. Because not all pleasures are created equal, and your brain doesn't work like a calculator. So what actually works? This is where modern science finally caught up, and it's not what most people expect. The research is clear now. Happiness isn't one thing, it's 3 separate systems in your brain, and most people only know about one. First, there's pleasure, the dopamine system, the wanting system. This is what you feel when you anticipate something good, when you scroll social media, when you chase a promotion, when you eat sugar. It's intense, it's addictive, and it's temporary. Philosophers from Epicurus to Bentham thought this was happiness. It's not. It's the bait on the hook. It keeps you chasing, never arriving. Second, there's satisfaction, the serotonin system, the feeling that you have enough, that your status is secure, that you're doing okay compared to others. This is longer lasting than pleasure, but it's competitive, it's relative. You feel it when you win, you lose it when someone else wins bigger. Aristotle kind of touched on this with his idea of flourishing, but he didn't know about serotonin. He didn't know that your brain is constantly comparing you to others, that satisfaction is a zero-sum game in your own head. Third, and this is the one almost every philosopher missed, there's meaning, the oxytocin and endorphin system, connection, purpose, belonging, contribution, the feeling that you're part of something bigger than yourself. This is the system that doesn't adapt. That actually compounds over time. And here's the crazy part. You can have pleasure without satisfaction. You can have satisfaction without meaning. But you can't have lasting happiness without all 3, with meaning as the foundation. Aristotle got close with his idea of purpose, but he made it intellectual. He made it about individual excellence. He missed that meaning is fundamentally social. It's about connection, not achievement. The Stoics got close with their idea of virtue, but they made it solitary. The wise man is self-sufficient. Turns out, the worst thing for happiness is self-sufficiency. Your brain literally evolved to need other people. Isolation is a happiness death sentence. Even the religious philosophers, Augustine, Aquinas, who said happiness was union with God, got the direction right but the mechanism wrong. It's not about the divine, it's about the biological reality that we are wired for connection, for story, for transcendence. And modern neuroscience proves this. Studies from Harvard's Grant Study, the longest-running study of human happiness ever conducted, followed people for 80 years. 80 years. And do you know what they found? Not wealth, not fame, not achievement, not pleasure, not even health, though that matters. The clearest predictor of happiness at age 80? The quality of your relationships at age 50. Let that sink in. The philosophers debated for centuries, built entire systems, wrote libraries of books, and the answer was sitting in plain sight. Be connected. Be loved. Love others. That's it. But here's why the philosophers missed it. It's too simple. It doesn't sound profound enough. You can't write a dense, impressive tome about call your mom or be a good friend. There's no philosophy department in have dinner with people who care about you. And yet, it works. It actually works. Let me give you an analogy that might help. Imagine happiness is a fire. Pleasure is the spark. It's bright, exciting, but it dies fast. Satisfaction is the kindling. It burns longer, but it needs constant feeding. Meaning is the log. It burns slow, steady, and produces the most heat. Every philosopher before 1950 was basically arguing about sparks and kindling. Some said sparks are everything. Some said forget sparks, focus on kindling. A few said you need both. Almost none of them understood logs. They don't make good debate topics. Find your people and serve them doesn't sound like the kind of insight that gets you tenure in a philosophy department. But it's the only thing that keeps you warm through the winter. And here's what makes this even more devastating to traditional philosophy. The relationship between these systems isn't additive. It's multiplicative. If you have zero meaning, pleasure and satisfaction eventually cancel themselves out. This is why rich, famous, accomplished people are often miserable. They optimized for sparks and kindling, and never built the log. This is why you can have everything you thought you wanted and feel nothing. The philosophers told you to want wisdom, or virtue, or pleasure, but they didn't tell you that wanting anything without connection is like building a house on sand. Now, I know some of you are thinking, but what about the individual? What about self-improvement? What about achieving greatness? And I'm not saying those don't matter. They do. But they matter as means, not ends. Achievement matters because it can connect you to others. Wisdom matters because it helps you love better. Virtue matters because it builds trust, and trust is the currency of relationships. Aristotle almost got this. He said humans are political animals, social creatures, but then he made the good life about individual excellence anyway. The Stoics almost got this. They talked about duty to others, but then they made the goal internal tranquility. Every time philosophy got close to the truth, it swerved away, because the truth was too ordinary, too human, too biological, not transcendent enough. But biology doesn't care about your philosophical preferences. Your brain doesn't care if you think meaning sounds too simple. It just knows that oxytocin released during genuine connection is the most reliable happiness drug ever discovered, and it's free, and it doesn't have side effects, and it never stops working. Compare that to the philosophical prescriptions. Virtue, hard to define, harder to measure, no guarantee of feeling good. Tranquility, possible but empty without connection. Temporary and addictive. It's not even close. And here's the final blow to traditional philosophy. They all assumed happiness was stable, that you could figure it out once and be done. Aristotle thought the virtuous person was happy by definition. The Stoics thought the wise person was tranquil by definition. But happiness isn't a state. It's a practice, a verb, not a noun. You don't achieve it, you do it. Every day, through specific behaviors that maintain your brain chemistry. You don't have happiness. You happiness. Like you don't have fitness. You exercise. This is why the philosophers were wrong in the most fundamental way possible. They were looking for the nature of happiness, the essence, the definition, the thing you could grasp once and hold forever. Happiness isn't a thing. It's a process, a dynamic, ongoing, relational process that requires constant maintenance. Like a garden, not like a statue. Aristotle wanted to sculpt happiness. The Stoics wanted to fortify it. The utilitarians wanted to calculate it. You can't sculpt, fortify, or calculate a garden. You can only tend it, daily, with other people, in real time. And that tending, it's not sexy. It's not philosophical. It's not going to get you invited to the symposium. It's asking someone how their day was and actually listening. It's showing up when you said you would. It's admitting you were wrong. It's making someone else's life slightly better and expecting nothing back. It's the stuff your grandmother knew. The stuff every culture figured out independently before philosophy got involved. The stuff that doesn't need footnotes. So here's the uncomfortable truth, and then I'll let you go. The greatest philosophers in history weren't wrong because they lacked intelligence. They were wrong because they lacked data. Because they were doing the best they could with the tools they had. And those tools were reason, introspection, and debate. But happiness isn't accessible through reason alone. It's not in your head. It's in your body, your brain, your relationships, your daily practices. Aristotle, Seneca, Kant, Mill, Nietzsche. Brilliant minds, wrong about this one thing, and that's okay. Science moves forward, we know more now. But the real question isn't were they wrong, the real question is, are you going to keep following advice that doesn't work? Because you can read Marcus Aurelius every morning. You can memorize Aristotle's Nicomachean Ethics. You can debate utilitarianism versus deontology until you're blue in the face. Or you can call a friend, help a stranger, join a community, build something with other people, do the unglamorous, unphilosophical, biologically proven work of connection. One path sounds impressive at dinner parties, the other actually works. Your brain doesn't care about sounding impressive, it cares about oxytocin, about belonging, about meaning built through action, not thought. The philosophers asked, what is happiness? And tried to think their way to an answer. The better question is, what makes me feel connected, purposeful and loved today? And then go do that. Not once, not when you figure it out, today, tomorrow, every day. Because happiness isn't a theory, it's a practice. And practices don't care about philosophy, they care about showing up. So show up for someone else. That's where happiness actually lives. Not in a book, not in a theory, in the messy, beautiful, unphilosophical reality of human connection. Everything else is just commentary.